Talking Comfort Live, a show that reminds us just how cool HVAC can be by discussing today's hot topics in home comfort. From learning to laughing and sharing personal experiences to challenging the leading industry narratives, our show goes deep inside the world of mini splits, heat pumps, and the inverter technology that brings efficient comfort to our products. And you can help us in our quest to make HVAC cool. We're looking for you to be a part of the show. If you have a question, whether it centers around application or installation, preventative maintenance, troubleshooting, a future technology, or anything we share on the show, please send it our way. We might take it live. Now grab a bucket and take a break. It's time for Talking Comfort Live.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm James McIntyre from GREE. I'm joined today by Daniel Hamrick and Jesus Fraga. This is our 11th episode of this year of Talking Comfort Live. Be sure to check out our previous episodes where we talked about preventive maintenance, subcooling, and even using DoorDash for parts delivery. Coil cleaner, whatever you need. I'll say it again. I'd rather have that than some of the helpers I've had drive my vehicle. So why do we do Talking Comfort Live? It's because we've been in your chair. Or bucket, or wherever you sit, when you're working. We've been there, all three of us, and most of our company has. We've dealt with the problems that you guys have dealt with. We've, whether that is waiting online for tech support, or having a hard time finding information about the product that you're working on, or just, the heat, the rain, the snow, you name it. We've all dealt with that. Yeah, it's also because you deserve a space to share your passion with us. In that vein, be sure to use the question mark icon to the right of the screen to ask any questions that you guys have related to GREE air conditioners and heat pumps. You can also, put your comments in there. Basically, anything that you feel like you would like to say to us at any point. It definitely adds a lot of value to the show and helps us to help you. On today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the tools as it relates to like the new R-32 A2L refrigerants, along with inverter-driven heat pumps. We're going to run a short clip about our I Feel function, available on most of our products. And then we're going to do our Stay Heated or Chill Out segment with Mr. Hamrick. And we're going to have the audience help us decide if he has the right to stay heated or if he needs to chill out. After that, we'll respond to a few comments we received on our YouTube channel. We don't respond to all comments. You've been to YouTube, you've seen the comments, right? But we encourage you to send your questions and thoughts anytime because we'll be checking on those throughout the show. So let's start talking comfort. Let's begin going straight to our Misnometer. Misnometer number one, let's see here. I can use my same bag of tools for R-410a and R-32 systems. What do you guys think?
Well,
okay, that's a pretty good.
Don't jump in there, Jesus.
Yeah.
So, there are a few different tools that you'll need for the R-32 systems. One of which is a left-hand threaded adapter or hose to connect to the refrigerant tank. Not to connect to the heat pump itself. You still use a mini split adapter for the GREE equipment. It's not going to be any different. And then, you'll need a few specific tools. Jesus, you want to share a little bit about the specific things that we need?
Yes. So you'll need I don't know did you just address this, the Micron gauge, and you would really want to make sure that your instruments that you have are compatible with, A2L refrigerants. And a good thing that I like to do whenever I was out in the field is pretty much keep separate gauges. So like, for instance, now that it's 410A, have a set of gauges for 410A, have a set of gauges for R32, and so be it, depending on the refrigerant that you are working with. That way, you don't have any kind of cross-contamination with hooking up the systems and, pretty much your refrigeration going through your gauges back into the system that you're working on.
Is it, question for you, Jesus, or James as well, is that Is there a concern about cross contamination with R-32 versus 410A as far as the oil goes, or like what if you did use the same set of hoses?
That's a good question. James, you got anything on to say about that?
Yeah, I definitely do. You are only supposed to have the things that are supposed to be inside that system. So if you think there's a risk of cross-contamination, I'd absolutely encourage you to mitigate that risk as much as possible, or in other words, reduce that risk as much as possible. I think if I were doing it again, if I was in the field again, I might have a set of gauges that I use for new installations and a set of gauges that I use on the 30-year-old package unit on a post office. So that I don't, I'm not sending old, gross stuff, green stuff, into my brand new equipment. And I know that's money. I get it, but tools could make it a lot easier and can make for a longer lasting system. Now, we definitely don't want R32 in our 410A systems. We don't want 410A in our R32 systems. Another one is to keep in mind on the oil, right? You've got mineral oil systems, you've got PVE systems, you've got POE systems. They're not supposed to be mixed, and they're not supposed to have, the opposite oil placed in them. Um, the testing data, all the ratings on the equipment, all of that stuff is based on the limitations of the equipment and the design of that equipment. So if it's designed to have PVE and R32 in that system, ensure that you've got PVE and R32 only in that system, right? What does it do? I don't know. We've got
We don't
tested.
want to find out, right?
No, we don't. We don't. I mean, everybody likes to have a lab like back at the house or something like that, where they hooked up their own stuff and they want to
In the
see what
garage.
they do. And yeah, now I mean, I've seen some comments on some of the Facebook groups and stuff. Like, I've heard people drop, different refrigerants into different systems, and everything's working great and all the rest of that. Um, you know, you've got companies that spend a whole lot of money on R&D and putting their equipment in labs and testing it and all that, and then there's a guy on Facebook. Who's that guy? I don't know. I mean, maybe. Sorry about that. I guess I locked up there for a second.
There you are. You're back.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Well, weirder things have happened in the past 24 hours, I suppose. So did we lose everything I said there, or what?
yeah. The last part.
Okay, we got most of it. All right, that'll work. Okay. So let's how about having a set of gauges, for instance, that's got the A2R refrigerant on it. I think it's going to be really helpful. When you're trying to look at temperatures. The
100%.
pressures are
Yeah,
pressures, right? But the
for
temperatures,
sure.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. How about ventilation and safety gear? What do you guys think on that?
Well,
Well,
so as far as, all right, go ahead, Daniel. Sorry.
I'll let Jesus talk to that.
Okay, all right. So, I'm pretty recently, out the field. As you all know, as far as the safety gear, that's a given, regardless if you're working on anything. Because you don't want to cut yourself, you don't want stuff flying in your eye, and man, that stuff happens. It could be something that's I've seen a hose pop, just because it's old and it's brittle. And really, I mean, honestly, you should probably be getting rid of the older stuff. If you see it's worn out, it's kind of rubbed out, you should just go ahead and get rid of them. But yeah, as far as the safety gear, for sure, you want to have your boots, safety, the steel toe boots, glasses, gloves, everything that's going to protect you, against the stuff that you're working on. As far as proper ventilation, you also, I mean, as I'm sure y'all know as well as I do, that the ventilation in an area where you're working sometimes can be confined. It's like real tight. So like any little thing that happens, you're brazing, heck, you're just hooking up. You're gonna have a little bit of de minimis coming off, and you just don't want to breathe that stuff for yourself, and you just want to make sure that you are working in a proper ventilated area. That way you can avoid as much hazard as possible.
I don't know
Yeah,
about you,
I mean,
Jesus, but I remember sweating out a R-22 compressor
Yeah.
with my
Oh
head down
man.
in there in the condenser, and just that little bit left over creates some not pleasant
Nasty.
stuff to breathe in.
Yeah.
And with something like R-32, you want to be even more cautious.
Yeah, I mean, we've always had the oxygen displacement characteristic of refrigerant in the first place. Same thing goes with nitrogen. You know, if you're working in enclosed areas, enclosed environments, you need to have ventilation and an escape plan. I mean, I know that that's not something that we like to pride ourselves in, but I think I was told quite a long time ago on safety glasses, I got really tired of, getting stuff in my eye. And sometimes you get that warning. You get the one that's like right next to your eye or whatever. If you're
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, that's a warning, right? From above, the universe, whatever you want to say, right? Um, and somebody one time told me that, like it's fine. Sometimes people make fun of you for wearing all the safety gear and all that kind of stuff. But the guy told me, he said, you let that soon-to-be one-eyed guy laugh all he wants.
Yeah.
So I mean, no offense to anybody out there, but I mean, I thought that was pretty good. I mean, I wear safety glasses pretty well constant. Not while I do, sitting in front of a computer or whatever that I do now or talking on the phone, but yeah, it's safety is definitely important. You only got one back, you only got two knees, you only got two eyes, that kind of thing, and taking care of yourself goes a long way. I mean, everybody knows who's plenty of people is worn out. Hey, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and throw it out there too. A lot of us work on rooftops and all that. Some of us have the skin for sun, maybe more so than others. I don't. I got sunburnt a whole lot, and lots of sunburn early on in your years can end up being stuff you don't want to have to deal with later.
Very
So
true.
yeah, some sunscreen, a big hat, maybe long sleeves, stuff like that really comes in handy, and it keeps you comfortable. Over a long
And
period of time.
maybe even a safety harness if you're up on the roof, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Right.
I'm just like, really, I gotta put this on. But hey, if you fall,
Yeah.
so safety first, right?
Yeah. Which you can always lean on OSHA and stuff like that. I know heating and air guys love to joke about that, but I mean, there's definitely some
They're there
things.
for a reason.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I think if you've done it long enough, there's been plenty of situations where you might have been placed in an unsafe environment, something like that, and it's good to be able to go home at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. So, what do you think about leak detection? That's one key thing I think that's a little different. Like if you're using an electronic leak detector.
Yeah, it's I believe you're not capable to use the heated diode
Correct.
link connections, right? Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I got a leak detector for sale. If anybody if anybody
Anybody
wants,
needs one for
yeah.
410A or 22.
And well, I'll tell you what, if you remember what a halide leak detector is, or a halide,
Yeah.
um, you can join me in having joint pain, I guess. But because I mean that's a bit old school, but if you don't know, it used to use an open flame and the flame would change color to let you know that you were leaking refrigerant. Um, pretty old school, but yeah, so anything that might, help to cause excess heat, like a heated diode, something like that, open flames or whatever, it's highly recommended not to use any of those things at all. Um, but yeah, go ahead and use this as an opportunity to remind you that there is a question mark button to the right of the screen, and you can ask any questions or make any comments that you'd like. Anything that we might have missed that you think is also very important. I mean, everybody learns different lessons out in the field. And one of the great things about being human is that we can communicate those things to each other and not have to experience those and make those same mistakes. I like to pride myself in making wholly new mistakes rather than repeating the mistakes of others. What do you guys think? You think Micron gauges, that's in our manuals constantly, do you think those are a waste of time?
What's that? The micron gauges?
Yeah, what do you think?
Oh no, those are absolute necessity. Whenever I started out in the field, I'm gonna be blunt, I'm gonna be honest. I did not use a micron gauge, but that's just because I didn't know to. Where I was working, they just said, just go hook up this vacuum pump and just let it go for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and pull it off, and we're good to go. And You learn really fast once you start doing some digging in your own research how critical those are because I mean, whenever you're reading a just a gauge, there's no way that you can really tell if that's really below, the micron level that the manufacturer is calling for. So you're really just guessing. You're just looking at a gauge and going off of how long it's been, and you're just going off of that and you're just letting it go. So absolutely, yes, you definitely need a micron gauge.
Not just for 32.
No, not just not just for
Yeah,
32. We're talking about
yeah.
every refrigerant.
Hey, and also, hey, anytime you're in the supply house, they got 9-volt batteries there, and double A's and triple A's and all that. Make sure you're stocked up on batteries.
Yes.
I wouldn't recommend grabbing the 9-volt battery out of somebody's smoke detector. Those things are dead usually anyway, so it's not going to help you. Make sure you got the batteries, you got everything. I mean, that kind of goes back to one of the segments that we did in a previous episode with Jesus was having the right tools for the job, being prepared for the job, maybe even having like a checklist on things that you might need. I like to write things down, or excuse me, I know that writing those things down and having a checklist is effective. I haven't always done that. I'm like, oh, I'll remember it. That doesn't work. I mean, how many times have you
And
been to
then
the
you
store
end
and
up
forgotten
having to go
one
get the
thing?
9-volt battery on your lunch, and uh,
Right.
that works for your meter, your micron gauge, your refrigerant scale,
Yeah, you haven't changed
and they're
from one
always
to the other
dead.
to the other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not only that, but in order to put the battery in it, you got to go get a screwdriver and all the rest of that. I always complain about having to get a screwdriver to take the battery back off of it, but then things that I have that don't have the screw, I don't have the back anymore.
Yeah.
So just
Oh
like
yeah.
just like to point that out, that ends up in the attic insulation or something. But yeah, no, that's all good stuff. All right. Furthermore, on that, every manufacturer's got recommendations for it. ASHRAE also has recommendations on the proper, evacuation techniques to ensure proper vacuum. If you're working on long piping and all that, a triple evacuation can be far quicker. Doesn't sound like it would be, but it can be far quicker. Um, and if you don't know, that's just a process where you pull a vacuum down to a certain amount, right? You release that vacuum with nitrogen, dry nitrogen, right? And then you do that again. You do that a couple times. You basically triple evacuation, right? And that can help speed up the process, particularly like in a high humidity environment. It may take a long time to get a lot of that moisture out.
Or if you're
Um,
servicing something.
or if yeah, because God knows, I mean, what is in that system? You guys that attend this kind of stuff, you guys do it perfectly every single time. But there's a lot of people out there, that you bid against and all that. There's no telling what is in that system, right? Maybe they're out replacing a piece of equipment that Jesus put in, a few years ago, right? Um, I'm just messing with you, Jesus. But but maybe they're replacing a piece of equipment that vacuum wasn't pulled, or that they went real old school with it and just put some refrigerant through there and try to push the air out, that kind of thing. But yeah, on servicing equipment, that's another good point. I mean, you're using a lot of equipment uses oil that has a tendency to try to absorb moisture. You know, some of those oils like POE will break down into their component parts. They'll break down into acids and bases, like what they're formed from. You're not getting that out with a vacuum pump. You're not going to get that out once that's done. Fortunately for us, we use PVE and it doesn't break down like that. Um, that's not an indication not to pull a vacuum, right? So, so not only does it affect the long-term operation of the equipment, it also can affect it in the short term as well, right? Having non-condensables in the system, never fun to troubleshoot, you know, and you can save on time on callbacks and all that.
Yeah.
Playing, where's
James, I
that
just want
moisture?
yeah. I wanted to add something on top of that. Whenever we're pulling vacuums out in the field, on any piece of equipment, whether it's, long line sets or even shorter line sets, we can't get impatient and just say, man, this thing's it's not going down. It'll get there. After you verify that it is a tight system and that you have no leaks present. One thing that I used to like to do was as soon as I put whatever I was doing as far as service wise, once I had it pumped down or the refrigerant recovered, I would pull out whatever I was pulling out and then put it back in, obviously. But then as soon as I got it connected and everything, just go ahead and flow nitrogen through it. And now the regulators for nitrogen, you know, they'll have the braze setting, so it's like 3 cubic feet per minute or something like that. And
Yeah.
Right.
I've noticed that did help out as far as how fast the vacuum would pull down. Because when you have it open, especially if you're gonna have it open and run to the store and come back, you're talking about hour, 2 hours, and that just lets outdoor atmosphere get introduced into the line set, into the heck, if it goes all the way back to the compressor into the oil, and as we all know, oil, I mean, it's an absorbent. So
Right.
what's that?
Oh, I said right. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah. So this is one of the things that, like, I guess a tech tip uh, for the techs out there, you know, to kind of speed up the process at the end of the day, because you know we get impatient and we want it to go as fast as it can. I think that's one of the ways that that'll help out the tech out in the field.
That's a really good point, Jesus. You know, I'm always scared to turn the vacuum pump off and break that vacuum because I'm like, all that
Exactly.
time invested getting it down to where it's at, I don't want to lose it, you know? But breaking it with nitrogen and then starting over, it goes quicker than just sitting there or, you know, just waiting on it. So,
Yeah, well, I mean,
Especially,
you know, there's other things. I mean, if you change the process in your mind just a little bit for when you start pulling that vacuum, like you get the piping hooked up first, you start pulling that vacuum, and then you do your wiring, your low voltage, your insulating, your taping, your mastic or your pookie, depending on where you're from. You start doing all those things during that time. Go out and take a look, make sure that you're still pulling down, that kind of thing. You can change that process. And in that regard, it's a lot like having a checklist or be prepared for the job. Same thing. It's like, hey, we go and do these things so we're not sitting there wasting time. Now, however, if you do find yourself sitting there on a bucket, nothing to do, you know, you can go to YouTube and take a look at our videos on GREE Comfort. You
there
can
we
do that.
go.
Take a look at
Yep.
that. So yeah, a lot of good information there. I mean, one thing I will point out too is like, given moisture, a vacuum is a very important thing. Um, I will say that, I mean, maybe I bring up a little bit of a controversial topic. Who knows? Maybe I cause problems. But for a long time, people thought that filter dryers, would just take care of a lot of those problems. Just wholly eliminate those, or it's a built-in little safety feature, something like that. But it's like putting on a Band-Aid and you're not cut yet, It's like, how about stop cutting yourself, Wear your proper PPE and you don't have to worry about, putting bandages on all the time. It's the same thing with a filter dryer.
or
If you clean
electrical
the vacuum
tape.
like you need to, you don't really need to be drying. If you braze with nitrogen, you don't really need to be filtering either. So we do have built-in strainers throughout all of our equipment, a load of them, in some of our products, that help to filter that stuff out. And you pulling a vacuum is what is going to help us not have any moisture in that system. But one thing I will tell you to keep in mind on filter dryers is to leave those capped until you're ready to use them. Desiccant,
Yeah.
well, desiccant inside that filter dryer works immediately. It starts pulling moisture out immediately. I've actually been to manufacturing plants before that built equipment that put filter dryers in their equipment, and they would begin by removing the caps off the filter dryer, and then it would be about 30 minutes later they'd be putting those filter dryers on there. Just saying, not going to say who that was, but when it acts to absorb moisture almost immediately, you're breaking down that desiccant material. You are making it so it can't operate as well. That's what you're doing there. I mean, that desiccant material is not unlike the desiccant material you might find in like beef jerky or a pair of shoes or what they tell you to put your phone in. That desiccant material has already been used, man. It absorbed the moisture that it absorbed. And that's it. And you got to heat it up to get the moisture out, by the way. But
Do you save those little packets out of the beef jerky and reuse them for something?
I do not. No, absolutely
Okay,
not.
just checking.
Well, I'm just saying. It's thought that they continue to work and all that stuff. You throw them in a drawer or something like that. Well,
Once they're full, they're full.
that's it.
There's no
They're full.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you do. You have to heat, and some of the commercial guys might know that too. Dealing with desiccant wheels and stuff. or just any kind of dryers like that, you do have to use heat to get the moisture back out of that desiccant material. And some may say, hey, well, maybe that'll happen during heat, like during heat mode on the heat pump.
No.
Great. Now the moisture's right back in your system. If it is capable of doing that, it's right back in your system. So it's not, I don't know. We get involved in a lot of conversations. So like, around stuff like that. So that's how they come up. Um, let's see here. Let's take a look at some more, questions. Yeah, we have, far more than, are the pressures, subcooling, superheat going to be similar to 410A? So from like on the temperature charts, it doesn't seem to be that far off. Now, as far
It's
as the
pretty
amount of
close.
pretty close, yeah, I gotcha. Now, as far as the amount of superheat subcooling, that's gonna that's likely to vary. For the R32 equipment, we can use less refrigerant than others. With R32, we can use less refrigerant, so we can have a difference in subcooling and superheat and still be able to maintain the capacities that we need at a higher efficiency level. So, you may see some differences there. Um, you got anything to add to that, guys?
No, just that if you're dealing with a mini split, for instance, a GREE mini split heat pump, you're not really looking at superheat and subcooling. You've got one side that you're connected to, the low side or the high side if you're in heat mode, but you're not looking at that. To get a proper charge, you have to weigh it back in. So
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, especially in reference to our inverter driven, uh, you know, variable speed equipment. Yeah, the superheat and subcooling. I mean, we're not typically looking at that anyway, but I mean, I guess in general, if you're talking about other styles of equipment, many of our partners out there do sell other styles of equipment, other types of equipment. So, yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind. Yeah, I think that you're gonna see a difference. How much of a difference, I'm not sure, but where can you find that information, right? That's going to be in the manufacturer's manual. Let's take a look at that. If nothing more than just do the people who have to write those things just a little bit of that much service. Writing manuals is never fun. It's not fun at all, for those of us who've done it, and you hate to know that you do all that work and then people don't read it. So so take a look at those subcolon or superheat charts, and just make sure the equipment's charged correctly. Um, let's see here. With the R32 upcoming refrigerant change, will we be letting you know a list of items that will be needed to let dealers and wholesalers and all of the customers out there to know how to work with the R32 on GREE? Yeah, absolutely. We plan on some videos for specifically that. We also have many different training events coming up this fall, and well, sorry,
and
I
we
guess
actually
not this fall,
started
but later on. Yeah, go ahead.
we kicked off the fall training with a R32 training there live from Atlanta. I believe it's available on YouTube. And we talked about the different tools. We got some actual tools that you would need from Navac, and so we got the or the left-hand thread hose and some adapters, and talked about the different things. So we covered it pretty well in that video there.
Right. So just to be clear, on that left-handed thread, that's only on the refrigerant cylinder
Correct.
itself. Okay. Okay. How about recovery cylinder? Do you know if that's also left-handed?
Well, that's one thing that we tried to get an R32 recovery tank specifically from a distributor. We couldn't find one that was available because we wanted to confirm that. I assume that we're going to need a different tank because it's going to have different ratings and labels on it for transportation. So I assume that it would end up being a left-hand thread on that recovery tank as well, but we weren't able to physically confirm it.
I gotcha. Yeah. So Well, and it makes sense because I mean, if it's going to be used for A2L refrigerant, you don't want to end up mixing the A2L refrigerant with anything else.
Right.
Um, yeah, that's good. Also we wouldn't want to mix like any other A2L refrigerants with it either, right? It's
Right.
going to throw that blend off for those other folks. Not that. Um, which actually brings me to the next question is what kind of oil is used with R-454? I think that probably just depends on the manufacturer. Just like with 410A, there were two options that were used. There was the POE that we discussed earlier, it having the tendency to absorb moisture but also break down in the presence of moisture. And PVE does absorb moisture but doesn't break down. I think that's probably the choices that you're going to end up with as well. So in some cases, a manufacturer might choose PVE, or some cases the manufacturer might choose POE, regardless of the type of refrigerant that's in it, 454 or R32. In our case, our factory likes to use the PVE because we feel like it's a better oil all the way around. But like I say, some manufacturers might use POE. Like many split manufacturers currently use POE. I think that may be just a cost benefit analysis type thing. It could be a little bit cheaper. Who knows? Who knows? So you'll have to check on the data plate itself. It'll let you know how much or what kind of oil it's in it typically. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and run a segment about I feel, and I ask that you pay attention to that because it's on our remotes, and people are going to ask you, customers are going to ask you what the I feel is. All right, so go ahead and watch this. I feel on the remote, if you don't know about that, there's a button on that remote that will let the indoor unit effectively sense the temperature of the remote itself. So if you're holding the remote, it gives you a more accurate representation of the temperature that you are experiencing. So once you press that button, it basically applies a correction factor. If it is 75 degrees at the remote itself, it's being sensed at the remote. If it thinks it's 75 degrees, you hit I feel, it will let the indoor unit know as long as you hear a beep, right? It lets the indoor unit know that you're looking at 75, and it does that for 15 minutes. So you might see it ramp up, ramp down, whatever it is that you're looking for it to get for 15 minutes. And every 15 minutes, while I feel is enabled, that light sensor, that our transmitter on the front of that remote will flash every 15 minutes from then on. If the unit picks up that signal, it will continue to use I feel. If it doesn't, it returns back to normal operation. What a great looking guy. Yeah, so I feel is absolutely a popular feature that's been used a lot. You got anything to add on that, Daniel or Jesus?
It is a useful troubleshooting tool. And I did ask the factory when I was in China week before last. I asked them about the operation of the iFill and the operation of setting a wall controller to sense the temperature. Specifically for mini splits is what this was directed at. I'm not sure about multi-pro indoor units, but if the indoor ambient sensor is failed, it will continue working off of iFill or the wall controller. If you have it sensing from the wall controller, the system will continue working even though that indoor ambient sensor has failed. So interesting. If you have one failed, you want to get it working, put it in iFill, tell the customer not to move the remote, and then you can go get that, order the sensor and go back and put it on. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I can tell you, in my own house, I've used iFill a lot in particular rooms. Um, so it is line of sight, for the remotes that are line of sight. Every 15 minutes, it sends the signal and says, hey, I'm this temperature. It's basically like an offset temperature. If it doesn't pick it up after 15 minutes, it says, okay, we'll just go back to normal, how we were running before. But I mean, depending on the application, I mean, a lot of you know that you don't have to actually point it in the direction of the unit sometimes, it's line of sight. So it's just like a TV remote in that regard. Like you might be able to point it at the ceiling. Well, luckily for you, our remote cradle that you put the remote in also points at the ceiling. So if you hit a button and it beeps, that means the iFill is going to work where that remote's at. You know what I mean? So if it's across the room, something like that, that can help to serve as kind of like a wall-mounted thermostat in that regard, without having to run wire and all that and the rest of it. It's like a wireless thermostat.
Yeah,
Um, some of our products have had radio control, in built into the remotes, and the iFeel
that's
will
a
work that
throwback.
way. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
been a little while.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but I will say that on that model, using iFeel on the radio controlled remote made it really difficult to troubleshoot.
Yes, it did.
I'll say that. So yeah, it made it real fun. Why is it coming on when I tell it not to? Stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's a bit of a throwback, I know, um, but yeah, iFeel can definitely work. Now, one thing I will say is, if you've got a wall mount unit that's 2 feet off the ground, or there's like a great big china cabinet sitting underneath it, or or a homeowner decided to try to make an attempt at hiding the unit altogether, that kind of thing. I feel is not a fix for that. It's not a fix for that at all. It's like having poor airflow on a regular system and thinking that moving the thermostat's going to fix it. That's just
It
not
just
how it
don't
works.
work.
No, it doesn't work right. Okay. So shifting gears for a moment, we're going to take a look at our stay heated or chilled out segment. All right. Now there's an audience vote on this. So you can vote using the question mark icon to the right of your screen. So in the same place, you're going to type either stay heated or chill out, and we're going to add those up by the end of the show and let you know what the consensus was, whether or not Daniel should stay heated or chill out. Okay. So what's bugging you today, Daniel?
Oh man, let me tell you, James, I'm just all irritated about providing model and serial numbers.
Yeah.
A lot of times when folks reach out to tech support, they get a little bit irritated at the request for a model and a serial number. And I don't know why, because I've always had to have that model and serial number. That was the first thing I write down when I determine what's wrong with the equipment, right? I write that model and serial number down. I get in the truck, I start calling people. Nowadays we get on our phone and start looking to see if our distributor has the part or whatever it is. But not providing model and serial number is really delays a lot of different things. We've one, for instance, that comes up is for example, you call and you say, hey, what's an 86 error code? Okay. All right. Well, I've got a couple of different answers for you. If you tell me the model and serial number, then I can tell you what that H6 means. But if you don't give me a model number and a serial, then I might tell you it's an outdoor fan motor, or I might tell you it's an indoor fan motor. Now you're working on the wrong one, depending on what model you have. You're troubleshooting the wrong motor. So I don't know. Should I stay heated about it or chill out?
So, in other words, you're saying um, the model number, each individual character has something to do with a certain part of the unit, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it does. It tells us a lot of different things about the equipment. It tells us if it's 115 volts, 230 volt, a lot of different things. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I mean, it does help tech support to know what it is you're looking at. I mean, I'll say that. I mean, if I could add to the stay heated, all right, on the model serial number and all that, uh, what seems to be the problem today, sir? It ain't working. Okay, figured that's probably why you called. That kind of thing. Like, it ain't cool and whatever. Now I know that. not everybody's going to be there when they call, and on site, or, maybe there was some delay, it's real busy, that kind of thing. But if you can have a lot of the information like that, like if you're taking temperature readings, or you're describing to the tech on the phone, what was going on, that kind of thing. Most of the time, we can help, to provide information to get it fixed, next time you're out there or whatever. Well, I tell you, I understand exactly why you need the models and serials. It also helps us track things, right?
Most certainly.
Yeah, it helps us track things. Like, so if we were to find that, like, let's say a model had I don't know, had sensors that, seem to be more common, then, we can work to help fix that and prevent those problems in the future, that kind of thing too. So
Yeah, it certainly helps. If we see that model come up multiple different times with a particular problem, then we can report that back to the factory and make sure that the quality is under control.
right. Yeah. We can never really go, we've had a lot of whatever, it's, we do have to have data, around that kind of stuff. We got to be able to indicate that. Okay. So anything else that you guys like to add while we see, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and call it. Looking at the count that we've got right now is 21.5. I see no way. I see no way that Chill Out has a path for victory here. Um,
All right, I get to stay heated.
you get to stay heated. That's the last thing that Daniel needs, is to stay heated about stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He needs to stay heated. I agree with you guys on that. I'm just gonna assume that the Chill Out folks were mistaken. All right. Maybe it wasn't clear, but
The question wasn't clear.
yeah, maybe the question wasn't clear. Maybe that's the way it is. What about you, Jesus? You think stay heated or chill out?
I think stay heated for sure. Especially, for like a tech too, just like an opinion of mine. Once you really start noticing the model numbers and you start memorizing them, you know exactly what you're working for, what you're working on. So you can help out the counter guy or the technical support rep in getting the part that you need by pretty much being pretty familiar with, if you're working for the XXX, it's going to be whatever part you're looking for. So it's good to pretty much be able to not memorize them, but just see them and then be able to recite, oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, plus it actually reminds me of something. You ever see the techs talking about, like, their wives getting their phone to look through their pictures and see what they take pictures of?
Yeah.
They expect to see, like, the children, the kids, the
Oh no.
family, and all that, and it's just model number after model number.
Words and model numbers and
Yep.
model numbers and
Bad piping,
installs and-
yeah.
bad piping they saw, stuff they sent to their friends, that kind of thing. Yeah, no, that's all right. So that's good. Let's see. Let's go ahead and run another clip. And then we are this time it's a Q&A session with Dale Benedict, our sales director for the entire Western United States. Go ahead and roll that one, please.
I put myself in their shoes. What's good for their business? They go, product, price, backup. One of the things that GREE has to offer is our product offering, ranging from the entry tier, mid, high tier, multi-zones, now our flex, our multi-pro, things like that. And then what ties along with that, who do we call, right? Luckily for me, I have a really good team. The reps, myself, the internal GREE team, which is probably one of the best that I've worked with, and then our president. She lets us do what we do. I work for companies that, they're this way or no way, right? So there's always that hurdle ahead of you. You're always pushing the ball. But once you get the ball up on top of the hill, gravity takes over and the ball's gonna roll down the hill, right? Well, working for this company, the ball's always rolling down the hill. Have my coffee about 6 in the morning. It's really good. Get my computer fired up. The phone calls start coming in. When we, as a team, close a project that we've been working on for 3 months. It finally comes through. Or you get a phone call from somebody in the field after hours, and they thank you for picking up the call, just for helping people out. We're in a service business, man. And to help somebody that is like, it's minus 20 outside, right? They can't get the unit running. And you tell them where to press the button to get the unit running until the next day they can get a service tech out, right? I don't know how they got my phone number. The homeowner's calling, you know, but we were able to take care of it. So, yeah.
I appreciate that, Dale. Well, you know, Mr. Benedict there's absolutely telling the truth. You know, we also do this because we care about this. We care deeply about this sometimes. I usually jokingly refer to being called a nerd at my house pretty often, you know, but we do, you know, for many of us out there, many of you watching, you know, there's a lot more to it than just a job. I mean, I hesitate to call it a lifestyle, but it almost is, right? I mean,
It is.
stuff from dark to dark. You know, you're busting your butt every day, or you're, I mean, busting your butt and using your head. Like we got to do both. You know, we got to use the head. We got the headache. We got the migraines. We got all that, and we're sunburnt, and we're, you know, thirsty, freezing to death, or whatever. Or people making
when you
fun
lay
of
your
us.
head down at night, you're thinking about that one you couldn't solve.
Yeah. I mean, luckily you're immediately out because you're also physically tired. But right. But yeah, you're absolutely doing that. Yeah, you really are. All right, so let's look at the results so far from the audience for the state. Well, you know, we actually saw that. I think was it 21 or 27 to 5. Okay. All right. So it just seems to get worse or better, depending on how you look at it, the longer it goes. All right. So let's take a look at some of the questions that we have from our audience. Again, question mark icon to the right of your screen if you'd like to ask questions. Okay, here. We have some very nice comments about the about Dale's video, and I also agree. Really great video. So let me go ahead and scroll through all those. I'll let him know that he's got a fan club now. All right, we got one question about iFill. Is iFill an average, or is it just one or the other? Okay, so when iFill is enabled, it is using only the remote sensor. I mean, does that make sense? Okay, so if your remote sees 75, your unit's sensor sees 72, it's going to go, oh, okay, it's actually in fact 75. We need to work off of 75 degrees. And the reason why that checks every 15 minutes or so is because, you know, your remote might move around with you. And thank goodness it's line of sight, because if you put that remote in your pocket or your kid puts it in the toilet or something, I say that from my own experience, by the way. If I've got a lot of extra remotes in my house, but you know, luckily it does need to be line of sight, so you're not going to get inaccurate readings from it being placed somewhere it shouldn't be placed, right? So that's a really good question. Appreciate that. Okay, well, we have a question about oil too. What is the difference between POE and PVE oil, and what does GREE use? We use PVE oil. It's polyvinyl ether. The other one's polyester, right?
Yep.
So I appreciate that. That was a question. Polyester.
Yes.
I'm not a chemist here, you know. But the main reason we do use the PVE oil is the fact that it, you know, although it can absorb moisture, it doesn't change the viscosity. It has a negligible effect on viscosity, you know, or the ability to lubricate properly. And it doesn't break down into its components. So like during the manufacturing process of, let's say, polyester, they will use an acid and a base, among other things, in a very complicated process. Again, not a chemist. But they will use these components to make this oil. And in the presence of moisture, it breaks back down into those components. You know, get what I'm saying? It's like if you put water on a cookie and it broke down into flour and eggs and whatever else is in cookies. I also don't bake. I do
That's a
heating
pretty
and
good example.
air. I do heating and air. I don't know if you guys can tell. I don't do much of anything else but this. So, uh, but yeah, that's the reason why we use PVE. You know, I different manufacturers I've worked for in the past also used PVE. I was told at the time that it was a little bit more expensive than POE, but the you know the benefits outweighed that that increase in cost. So that's the reason why we have chosen to continue to use PVE. Can you put a new refrigerant outdoor unit on an old 410A head if you flush the unit, or will you need to replace all? Okay, it's a good question. All right, so it's not necessarily a compatibility question. The problem that you would have there right out of the gate is going to be that the 410A head doesn't have the refrigerant sensor. So like right off the gate, even if it could talk, even if it could handle the temperature glide, even if it could do all those things, you've got an A2L outdoor unit and a non-A2L indoor unit. The one big safety that's placed into an A2L piece of equipment is the refrigerant sensor that's on those indoor units. So as a reminder, or this could be brand new for you, that refrigerant sensor, if it detects a leak, a certain refrigerant concentration, it brings the blower on and runs the blower to help dissipate that refrigerant to keep there from being a buildup so that it could ignite. You got to have a concentration. As anybody who's ever messed around with burners on a gas furnace can attest, you do have to have a proper, flammable gas and air mixture in order to get proper burning, right? To get burning at all. Well, that's helping to reduce the risk of. Okay, so I would say, yeah, you would have to change out both the outdoor unit and indoor unit in that case. So let's go ahead and swap that around. Okay, so say I've got a bad indoor unit and I want to keep the outdoor unit. I would encourage you to go ahead and sell both because why not? But right. I mean, that helps us, that helps you. Hey, everybody's happy, right? Now in that case, there's going to be then you're not talking about the refrigerant sensor, but depending on the manufacturer, that kind of thing, you may be talking about additional safety features that are in the outdoor unit that may not be present in a 410A outdoor unit, right? On top of that, then you're looking at temperature glides. You are talking about the possibility of oil differences, right? Whether or not you flush those out. I've seen people recommend the flush kits before. I've seen people speak against the usage of those. I think everybody understands that blowing nitrogen really hard through something doesn't get the oil out of it. It's like trying to blow all the soda out of a straw. There might be some straw, it might be some soda left in there, and your straw, especially if it's a crazy straw like these, some of these line sets are out there, right? You might not be able to get it all out. So I mean, there's definitely some things to look at. I mean, I think that. I mean, what do you think, Daniel? If you had that call, like let's say on that opposite end, like if somebody had an existing air handler, they really just do not, or existing outdoor unit, and they got a bad coil or something, they just want to swap it out and get a whole new one. What would your recommendation be in that case?
Right. I would most certainly recommend to replace both indoor and outdoor, just because it's a different refrigerant. I don't recommend reusing line sets when you're switching refrigerants. Like you said, you're not going to get all of the oil out when you flush it. Do people do it? Yeah, I'm sure they do, but it would be best to go with a new line set, new indoor, new outdoor. Make sure the system matches properly. It's not just a matter of whether it communicates or it works or any of that. It's a matter of whether it's rated with that indoor or with that outdoor. So if you're just replacing the indoor unit and it's an A2L unit, and you're leaving the 410A outdoor unit, then you don't have a proper rating. So, you don't know what's going to happen. And, it's like the discussion, it's always what happens if, right? Well, we're not engineers. The manufacturers design this equipment to be matched with a certain match, and the engineers design it, and they know what happens if it's matched. But they don't test things to go, hey, what happens if? They don't go through that process of what happens if, because they're focused on the product that they're manufacturing. So,
and selling.
in selling, right?
Yeah.
So definitely, do yourself a favor and your customer a favor and sell a good match.
Like, I mean, I enjoy a good hypothetical as much as anyone. You know, like what would happen? Let's think about it. Well, I mean, we do that pretty often. We catch ourselves doing that. You know, we get a question like
Yes.
call each other up, and we then dedicate the next 30,
Hey,
45
what if?
minutes, whatever, on this what if, and it's like, okay, all right, but a bit from a business standpoint, what's the recommendation we have to make in this case? Like what, like, oh, what if I use a 5/16 and inch and 3/8 line set? What does that do? And then we'll talk about it, and hammer it all out. It's like, okay, well, we also can't just stand behind it either. We don't have test data to prove it. But
Right.
like in that case, your R-32 unit is going to be using significantly less refrigerant. There's going to be less volume there. We're able to use less volume of refrigerant. Well, is the indoor or out going to be able to handle that and cool
Right.
effect? Are
Right.
you going to end up with a 10-degree delta T? That doesn't make anybody happy. Unless you're moving a whole lot of air, but that's a topic for another day, and you don't have humidity. Um, see, that's where we go. That's what happens. We start thinking
Down the rabbit hole.
going down that. Yeah, we go down the rabbit hole, and 9 times out of 10, it doesn't seem to help anybody at all. But it does help us do podcasts. It does help us do that.
True.
Lots of hypotheticals. I lost my questions here.
Here's one. Looks like maybe the next one on the list here. Are you able to recover R-32, then reuse it? I've heard the recovery tank is one way, cannot get refrigerant out. I'm not sure, honestly.
How do they get it out when you turn it in?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I don't know.
No, I mean, I really don't know. I'm not accusing or anything like that. I really don't know. I don't know, what you would do. Maybe they got a special way to do it. I don't know. Maybe they use a system of magnets or something to make the check valve go the opposite direction. But no, I don't know. I really don't. I mean, that's something we can find out and we can address in the next episode, or maybe even bring it up in a Tech 90 or something like that.
Yeah, we'll be looking for the answer on that one for sure.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I guess we also need to find out left-handed threads for recovery, tanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we love to think, well, logic.
We've got some more to learn, right?
Well, that's not the way it works, right? It's not always a logical thing. It doesn't, well, it makes sense this way, but it also makes sense the other way. How many left-handed hoses do you really need, or how many do you want to sell? I mean, that's the question, right? Okay, I got another one here. Can you tell me more about the new R-32 multi-zone systems and when they will be available? We have a substantial amount of R-410a inventory. I know other manufacturers have chosen to rip off the Band-Aid. We've heard good and bad about that. But we basically, when it comes to R-410a, we are business as usual for the foreseeable future. As we have to bring in, as we need to bring in R-32 equipment, basically, once we start running low on certain models, that's when we'll have R-32. So if we start running out of a particular single zone model, we start getting kind of low or something, or we see the track and it getting low, we're going to place an equipment order for R-32. Let everybody know that this model now will be for from here on out R-32 equipment. And it's the same thing goes for the multi-zones. Like as soon as we don't have some of the indoor units that might match with it, not that we run out of them, that we track, that we will, right? We'll be bringing those in, and then that's when they'll be made available. And I assure you that our entire sales force will let you know as soon as they are available, as soon as you have to make that change. Right? I think we covered that one as well. So let's see, which model would be more efficient, a LIVO or a Vireo? Well, that's an easy one. A Vireo would be a more efficient model.
Vireo, most certainly.
in terms of energy efficiency, right? In addition to that, the Vireo also is rated down to a lower temperature. It does have better heating performance than the LIVO.
Yep.
But there is a price difference between the two. So I mean that's just something that you have to consider. If you live in an area where you qualify for certain rebates,
Rebates. Yeah.
the higher efficiency equipment can typically get a higher rebate than some of that. So I mean, in some cases, it's enough to offset the price difference between some of our the price difference between the LIVO and the Vireo, for example. So in some areas it has worked that way, and many times where the Vireo ends up being the more cost-effective solution than the LIVO, just because of the rebates and all that. So one more time, the question mark icon to the right of the screen. Got a lot of good questions so far today. I think that's great.
Yeah, we have.
All right, so switching gears, we've selected a few comments that have been left on our YouTube channel at GREE Comfort. Be sure to check that out, like and subscribe, and all that. We're trying to get that gold icon for our YouTube channel, so I can put
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
I'm sure we
You'll
could
be the one that wins it,
one.
James.
Yeah, we could superimpose one right here, but I mean, you want to earn it, right? No, that's not the goal. It's we got a lot of good information on there. I mean, unfortunately, I'm in a lot of those videos. I don't know if you want to see me that much, but hey, we got some great people in those videos, so check those out. A lot of the questions that you have been answered. We don't mind answering them again, but they're definitely there. So you're in the field or something, or maybe even you got a call coming up on a piece of equipment you're not that familiar with. You can take a look at those videos, have some answers. The customer never needs to know that you watched a YouTube video about it before you got there, right? All right, so on the video hands-on GREE Flex installation and troubleshooting from at Gringo Loco 4570, is it okay to dip switch outdoor unit to 4-ton with 5-ton air handler? Okay, so in reference to the Flex product, right? There are dip switches where you can change the capacity of the outdoor unit and change the blower profile of the indoor unit. And what they're asking is, can they speed up the blower? Is effectively what they're asking. Go ahead, Daniel. Looks like you already got some thoughts on that, so have at it.
Well, that kind of goes back to the conversation that we had earlier about making sure that something is matched properly, right? So if you're switching the outdoor unit to 4-ton and you have a 5-ton air handler, then it's not necessarily matched properly. Now, I understand the thinking behind it. Comes from a long line of heating and air people that would install a 2-ton outdoor unit with a 2.5-ton indoor coil, right? But I get that the 0.5-ton switches might need to be made. Like, hey, let's say the indoor is a 4.5-ton, and you want to put that outdoor unit, set it to 4-ton, right? That makes a lot of sense. But if you got a 4-ton indoor, you got a 4-ton outdoor, that would be the proper match.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, rabbit hole it is. Okay, all right. This is all right. So,
here we go.
I know. Yeah, right. All right. So when we're talking about that 2.5-ton replacement system, right? Let's just call it a 2.5-ton, because 4.5 is kind of an odd size. Even though a lot of 5-tons you buy now are 4.5. Just go look that up.
Yeah.
Not ours. So anyway, well, depending on the model, but anyway, so depends on the model. But anyway, so if I've got a 2.5-ton I'm replacing, I go, okay, well, airflow wise, all I need is 2.5 tons worth of airflow. So if you're looking at it, that's, usually most people might consider that, 1,000 CFM, 2.5 tons, right? So they go, okay, well, I don't have a 2.5-ton outdoor unit to put with it, so I could either grab a 2-ton or I can grab a 3-ton. Okay. Well, do I want it to work properly on a hot day? Yes. So I might choose a larger outdoor unit. I might choose a 3-ton outdoor unit. And this is something that we've addressed before in the past in some of our videos in reference to the Flex and setting those dip switches. What I would recommend, and Daniel and Jesus, you can correct me if I'm wrong, what I'd recommend is that you could pick a CFM that would more closely match that 1,000 CFM that you would normally be looking for. but use a 3-ton outdoor unit, and you might even be able to set it up as the eco mode, right?
Yep. You certainly can. Yeah.
And what eco mode does is it changes that amount of time it takes to ramp up, right? If I put it in strong mode, it ramps up faster, right? It ramps up,
Right.
tries to get to its
Right.
max capacity faster. If I go eco mode, it does the exact opposite. It will try its best to slowly but surely ramp up. And in that case, if you set it for eco mode and it's a 3-ton unit, then maybe it doesn't have to hit a max speed by the time it satisfies the thermostat. Okay. But in this case, we're kind of going the opposite direction. In this case, we're trying to provide more CFM than what most would want to design around. It could be that you're adding filtration, and you're trying to, you're going to end up having to look at a much higher static application than you wanted. So you're trying to deliver, trying to change that blower profile so that you can get the CFM you need at a given static pressure. It could be something that you're doing there. You could be in a very dry environment where you're not so much worried about humidity removal. Because remember, the slower that blower is, it changes the profile overall of the sensible heat ratio. That is to say, like, I might have better latent heat removal, better humidity removal when I have a slower blower, as most of our friends in the Southeast can attest to. I slow that blower down some, I got a colder coil, I get more water out, that kind of thing. Because that's very important in those areas, right?
Right.
So in this case, there's only a very few, very special instances where I would want to use, instead of 1600 CFM roughly, where I would be trying to get like 2000 CFM. So I'd probably just do the 4-ton with a 4-ton setup in that case.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Now that we're out of the rabbit hole. All right. So the next one is a video. The video is troubleshooting a crosswired or mispiped multi-zone mini split. At Matt, bunch of Z's and stuff. In a crosswired system, icing doesn't always happen. In fact, most of the time icing up didn't occur, so I had to use other indicators to figure out the correct piping sequence.
That's a good question.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Now, in order for icing to occur, I mean, there's not a lot of detail here, but in order for icing to occur, or let's say this: if my unit is not calling for cooling, my blower still runs.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I had the blower set at medium or high, then the blower's on. Going to be kind of hard for me to ice up at that point.
Right.
But if I turn it off, most of the time, as we've seen, and maybe Daniel might be more apt to tell me exactly what he's seen, but most of the time, if you've got refrigerant flow and you don't have the blower on, you will start to get ice.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's the test. Like if you were to call tech support, that's what we would tell you to do. Turn all of them off, turn one on in cool mode, and then see if that one actually cools. And then if that one does not actually cool, then go look for the one that's starting to frost. Which coil is cold? And that's how you'll find your crossed wired.
Right. Yeah, so the point's not necessarily that ice occurs. I guess it's just which one's calling for which one's cooling and it's not supposed to be cooling.
These systems will try to adjust themselves the best they can because it knows what temperature the coil is through the coil temperature sensor. So it's going to try to adjust itself, the EEV, the compressor speed. It's going to try to avoid icing.
Right.
It knows that icing's not great for for operation.
Right. Now, that's also taking into account that the unit would need to be looking at the coil temperature sensor if it's not calling for cooling in the first place.
Very true.
Maybe the assumption is that it is installed correctly, and it doesn't have to worry about using the coil sensor on a unit that's off. Maybe that unit's in a garage area. Maybe it's below freezing in that garage area, and now you can't get cooling in your server room or something. I don't know, something that would need cooling when it's that cold outside, right? So maybe I do need to be able to ignore a space or a temperature sensor that is located in an area where I'm not responsible for heating and cooling at this moment. So why would I pay attention to it at all? And it could be that the multi-zone Gen 1 might be a little bit different than the multi-zone Gen 2, that kind of thing. There's a bunch of different reasons why. But another great way to determine whether or not something's going to be cross-wired or mispiped is to not do that in the first place. So if you,
Yeah.
I've done it. I think everybody has at some point. And I know it's never that, it's never that, right? I've checked it. I've checked it. I've checked it. I don't know how many times we did a tech support call that I did where, I checked it. I checked it. I checked it. So it's like, okay, let's run through this thing real quick. Let's just, hey, I got to do it, or whatever. Let's run through this. We'll check this. We'll check that, that kind of thing. And yeah, it ends up being, cross-wired and mispiped. I mean, we
One
don't
of the
have a problem.
funny,
We don't have a
one of
problem
the
taking somebody through that process. I mean, it's just we get it.
Right, right. One of the funniest things for me is when we determine that it's cross-piped, and what I'll hear is, but this thing's been installed for 2 years.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know. And you just now found out. Why is that? Because if all units are calling, then it's never going to ice up. You may never actually see the problem if all indoor units are calling. So it could go 2 years, 3 years, who knows, until your child, gets old enough to move out and go to college, and then that one room, you turn it off. And then all of a sudden you got problems.
yeah, yeah. And that absolutely happens. If I am running at a low speed, or even worse, like if I'm running at medium or high speed, like the locked-in speed during cooling. But particularly if I'm running at low speed and cooling, it may be such a small level of cooling effect at that point that nobody ever notices.
Right.
It may be
Right.
even they walk by and is like, is that cold air? Oh, maybe it's just because it's blowing. You know, they definitely let you know when it's not cooling, but they might not let you know that it was cooling, and they don't really know why. You know, I mean, there's a lot of times that you run across a unit that's cooling like that, barely cooling, and it's doing everything it's supposed to do. So,
Yeah.
we can't go, well, it's been installed like this for however long. I will tell you one story real quick. Um, is I worked for a manufacturer that had a button that you could press that would run it through like a startup sequence to correct this cross wiring,
Mm-hmm.
which was great until they would replace the board,
Oh.
and then the process would start all over again. Not knowing that it was cross pipe, not knowing that it was cross wired, that kind of thing, and then suddenly they're having to do it all over again. Well, it's been running like this for how many ever years?
For
There's no
how long?
way,
Yeah.
And one more, real quick. I went to a job. This is for a VRF system, but there's two different sets of wires, right? And they said, well, we marked them with tape. And I said, they pulled them through the, into the unit, and they said they marked them with tape. And I said, did you mark them with tape before you put it in the unit or after you pulled it through? So what does that matter? Well, yeah, it was absolutely, they were swapped. And that's what they did. They pulled the wire through, they pulled both sets through, and they went, okay, that one goes to wherever it's supposed to go. And they marked it with some tape. Well, they marked the wrong one. I mean, everybody does it. It's not a question of whether or not you're a good heating and air conditioning tech. How many times do you run, piping for a multi-zone system? Probably not 10,000 or something, that would it take to do it perfectly every single time. And
Yeah.
plus, if you got it, you can always blame it on a helper or something.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes. No one here's trying to, get on to anybody for a mistake. The goal's the same, right? We want it working for the customer.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Last but not least, comment on the GREE branch box versus Y branch or headers from Tennisser 1986. My question is, what size output supply duct is recommended for the 4-ton unit?
I
Well,
wonder if he means supply duct or like a branch box.
nah, I think they're talking about duct. Unfortunately, we
Duct.
don't know if we're talking about the like the
They may
slim
have
duct
commented
unit.
on the wrong video.
Maybe could be. No, like as far as the outlet, if you're talking about just the outlet from the unit itself, either the dimensions of the outlet itself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that might be a pretty good place to start. But as far as like how large your supply ducting should be, absolutely based on a duct calculator.
Yep.
Yep.
also known as a duculator. Maybe that's a registered trademark. I don't know. But absolutely
Get out the D manual.
get out the D manual, size the ductwork as it's supposed to be sized. I can't tell you what it's supposed to be. I don't know how long you're running it. I don't know how many runouts you got. I don't know what kind of CFM you're trying to deliver, so on and so forth, Okay, let me check on the questions. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it looks like we got them all.
Looks like we did. Okay. All right. Well, it's I guess it's time. Guess it's time to be over with. Well, I'll go ahead and let you know. Have a happy Thanksgiving, because our next episode is going to be first week of December. Yep, that's right. Daniel shaking his head. Yes. It's the first week of December. That'll be our next episode.
Oh, that was a question?
Yeah. Whatever other holidays might be occurring for you during that time, but also happy Thanksgiving from us. Be sure to check us out on YouTube. We're also on TikTok and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and all those other things that you might think are wasted time. So we're definitely on those. Yeah, definitely follow us on TikTok and hit that heart button, or whatever it's called on TikTok. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Love those videos.
I'm not in my 20s, so, but yeah, they're great. A lot of quick information, that kind of thing. And who knows, you might learn something, might save you some time in the future. And that's really what we're here for, save you time and get stuff fixed and get on with our day. All right. Well, until then, we will see you next time. And remember, at GREE, we're by your side.
We're by your side.
By your side.
Hey, thanks for watching Talking Comfort Live with GREE HVAC. Make sure to keep a lookout for an invite to our next show, or subscribe to our GREE Comfort YouTube channel to make sure you get notified anytime we release new content.